Okay, well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for Leads and Loons, a Toxic Relationship, which will be about 50 minutes. My name is Katrina. I work for Wild Rivers Conservancy as the Environmental Education Coordinator. I'll be in the background moderating the chat, helping with any technical difficulties. So before we begin, I'd like to mention a couple of housekeeping notes. Clicking at the chat icon on the bottom of your screen will open up the chat. I'm usually on the side. If you have any technical issues or comments to make this presentation work better, please put them in the chat. If you have any questions at any point in the presentation, I'm encouraging you to type those questions into the chat and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation or I guess whenever Kelly decides she wants to answer questions. This session is being recorded and will be made permanently available on the Wild Rivers Conservancy YouTube account. So with all of that housekeeping out of the way, I would like to introduce our speaker and give the rest of the time to them. So please welcome Kelly.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Kelly Amoth. I work at the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency out of our St. Paul office, and I work on a program called Get the Lead Out. Really excited to be here with all of you this morning. I'll go ahead and get my presentation up so we can get started. All right. Katrina, how are we? Can we see everything okay? Let's do a share here.
It looks perfect.
Great. We'll go ahead and get started. So I feel really lucky. I get to talk about two really interesting things. I get to talk about Minnesota's state bird, which hopefully all of you maybe are thinking about right now, which is the common loon. And I get to talk about fishing and fishing tackle and what those two things have to do with each other. We will go ahead and get started. So a little schedule for today. We're going to talk about adaptations of loons, things that make them special or unique and help them survive in their environment. We'll talk about threats to loons, make this connection between fishing and fishing tackle and loons and other species, and talk about some action items and some things we can do to protect our environment and the birds that we love so much. So loons are fish eaters, or maybe a new word for you. They are also called piscivores, which means they mostly like to eat fish. And so maybe some of you like to go fishing yourselves. I bet if you maybe don't like to go fishing, maybe you know someone who likes to go fishing or are around people who do. So fishing is very popular too, and our loons are trying to catch a lot of the same fish we are in the summertime too. And I love this picture of this loon with the fish in its beak. We'll think about this a little bit later too, but loons don't have teeth. So if you can imagine them trying to eat that small little sunfish there, they're going to probably move it around in their beak a little bit, and they're going to swallow it head first. Whole. And so that's important to think about with their digestion and this connection to lead as well. Loons will eat other things too. They also like to eat frogs, toads, salamanders, even crayfish in the summertime. And I'm going to talk a little bit too about what they like to eat in the winter too. And on a summer day, adult loons, like the one in this photo, are going to eat up to 2 pounds of fish a day, just themselves. And if you've ever seen loons and their chicks in the summertime, they also have to catch all the fish for their babies too. So they are working really, really hard to catch fish. Loons, so those of you that like to fish, I want you to think about where the fish are that you like to catch. And usually they are kind of deep, and those are the fish that loons want to catch too. And so loons have to have an ability to dive deeply to catch those fish. And so loons can dive up to 100 feet deep. and they can hold their breath underwater for up to 5 minutes. So if you've ever been maybe in a canoe or a kayak or another boat on a lake and you see a loon dive, I've always liked to try and predict where they're going to pop back up again. I am seldom right, but they will pop back up because that entire time under the water, they are looking for fish. Loons are visual predators, so they're using their eyes to try and find the fish that they want to go after to catch and eat. Maybe some of you also like to go swimming in lakes in the summertime. And not many people tell me that they like to be swimming around lots of plants underwater, and loons probably don't either. So they need to find lakes that have clear water, clean water that they can see through. So imagine trying to swim around and look for a fish to go after and catch and eat. It's a lot easier if that water is nice and clean and clear. So very important to think about water quality. Loons, because they have to dive so deeply, have very heavy, solid bones. An adult loon weighs about 11 to 13 pounds, which is about the same weight as a bald eagle. And if you've ever seen a bald eagle, they're big birds. And loons are quite a bit smaller, but they're heavy, they have to have those heavy bones in order to sink and dive so deeply. This is an amazing picture. It was actually captured by a scuba diver. And I love this picture. I want you to look at their legs and their feet for a second and notice how far back their legs are on their bodies. Loons are foot-propelled birds. So they're using their legs like paddles or oars to move through the water. And their legs are so far back in their bodies that they actually physically cannot stand up on land. If they tried to stand up, they would just tip right over. So another adaptation that they have. Loons are also able to kind of flatten their wings into their body to compress their body so they can sink even deeper down to the bottom of a lake. And being able to reach the lake is also another important thing for them to do when it comes to eating those fish whole, which we'll get to in a few minutes. Loons spend most of their time on the water, but this is a really great picture. I want to talk about their habitat, and this is a picture of a loon on its nest. You can see how close it is to the edge of the water. And the only time loons are on land is when they are nesting. They even sleep on the water. You'll notice that this nest, it looks like there are some nice cattails around it, and they are going to be trying to stay nice and hidden and safe while they are sitting on their eggs. A pair of loons in the summertime, they lay 1 to 2 eggs, and they only do that one time. Both parents will sit on the eggs, and they sit on them or incubate them for about 27 days, and then those eggs will hatch. And usually the chicks will hatch usually in June, depending on when our loons get back and when they start nesting. So, but loons feel very vulnerable or unsafe on land because they can't move away very quickly. They don't want to leave their nests and those eggs. Think about all the different animals that would probably like to eat an egg. So maybe a fox, maybe a raccoon, maybe a coyote. So think about those loons don't want to leave those eggs alone. And since the big reason for our loons to come back to Minnesota and to be here all summertime is to have their young, I wanted to share with you a little bit about the journey of a loon chick in the summertime because it's pretty amazing. So these are 2 little loon chicks that were born. This is when they're about 1 to 2 days old. And this is the only period of their life where loons can actually stand up on land. They are able to swim immediately, but they can't do anything else really. They can't find their own food, and they have to ride on their parents' back for protection. And their parents also have to catch all the food for them in the summertime in these first few days here. Also, Maybe some of you like to catch like a big muskie or a big northern. So think about those loon chicks. Those might be something that those fish would go after. So they have to stay with their parents, and their parents offer them all the protection that they can. Within a month, this is 4 weeks of those loon chicks, they're too big to ride on their parents' backs. But notice their feathers or their plumage is still kind of a fluffy brown color. So they're getting bigger, but they're still not able to do very much by themselves. This is 2 months into the summer. So we're probably getting into maybe late July, early August now. This is about 8 to 9 weeks. And so this loon is getting bigger. You can see its feathers are developing. You can notice that red eye. They're starting to grow bigger. They can start catching their own food, and they're starting to exercise their wings because pretty soon these loons are going to have to migrate in the fall. And this is by the end of the summer, so about 3 weeks. So maybe we're looking at late August, early September, mid-September. They are fully independent, and their parents have probably left them to do all the loon things that they need to do. They're going to fly for the first time. They're going to eat bigger fish that are close to the same size as their parents are eating. Their parents will maybe migrate ahead of them to their winter grounds. And loon chicks often stay wherever they were born on that lake for much longer. So especially with the winters we've been having lately, our winters have been starting a little bit later. It's been warmer later into the year. Loon chicks aren't going to be too eager or feeling like they need to migrate yet, but they will group up with other birds for that migration journey because their parents have already left. So just wanted to share that little journey of our loons and their development because it's so interesting to see how small they are and how big they become within just a few months, and how independent they have to be by the end of the summer for that migration journey. So speaking of migration, our loons in winter, we're up by the words breeding range in Minnesota, and we have had researchers that have actually banded and tracked Minnesota loons to see where they go in the wintertime. And we know our loons here go to the Gulf of Mexico, and they hang out in the Gulf of Mexico for about 6 months, and that's where they spend their winter. There are other loons in the United States. Minnesota has the second most behind Alaska, but the most in the lower 48 states. And the loons out in the Northeast region, so Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, New York, all those loons just go to the Atlantic Ocean. So not too far for them to migrate. But our loons, they go to the Gulf of Mexico, and their life becomes completely different than it is here in Minnesota in the summertime. This is what a loon in wintertime looks like. So very much like the juvenile loon at the end of the summer. So they're all of those beautiful checkerboard feathers that we're used to seeing here in Minnesota in the summertime, that bright red eye, all of those things kind of change for the winter as they camouflage more to the ocean waters around them, or the Gulf waters around them. And their diet changes too. So talk about adapting to your environment. I'll pause here. So loons, in their migration journey, they lots of times students ask about loons flying because they are so heavy. They have an awkward takeoff, so they kind of have to run across the water. But once they're in the air, they can fly up to 75 miles per hour, which is usually the speed that we're going on major highways. So they can fly really fast and really far. So talking about their adaptations for the wintertime, our loons go from eating mostly fish here in Minnesota in the summertime to eating mostly crabs, or a lot of crabs, in the wintertime. And they also have to adapt to the water that they're living in. So our lakes here in Minnesota are freshwater lakes, and they move and they spend the rest of the year in saltwater ocean or the Gulf. So adapting to two completely different ecosystems. And they're actually able to process that salt water that they're living in. Um, so um, I'll take a breathing pause there. Um, if there are questions, Katrina, so far, I'm happy to answer them. Also happy to wait until the very end too.
Well, you have one question. You have, what is a loon's wingspan?
Oh my gosh. You know what? I have to be honest and say that a student has never asked me their wingspan. Um, and so that is not a number I have in my head right now. So maybe if the questioner would look that up and we can come back to that at the end and you can share that information with me, that'd be great. So I can add that to all the numbers I have in my head already about loons. So sorry, I don't know off the top of my head. All right. So thinking about threats to loons, I say all the time that people love loons here in Minnesota. I haven't met anybody of any age who doesn't like to tell me a story about loons, or maybe that they've seen one or heard one. But so lots of ways that we can protect them because they have several threats. So thinking about habitat loss, this is a natural shoreline that a loon would like to nest in. So it wants to be hidden away from predators, not only for itself, but also those eggs and its chicks. So keeping our shorelines natural, where loons have safe hidden places to make their nests. I used to work on a beautiful lake and took kids paddling on it. Every single summer, there were nesting loons on that lake. Not only were we being respectful to the loons and their nesting location, but I honestly have no idea where their nest was. That's how well hidden away it was. So keeping our shorelines natural. This also protects the water too. So making sure we're not putting in grass all the way down to the edge of water. So not only for the loons, but also for our water. Another big threat to loons is climate change. So this is a projection from National Audubon Society, and this will just keep playing. So I'll let you hopefully observe it. But if you watch the yellow area, that is the summer range of our loons. And you'll notice where Minnesota is, that as this timer, this projection goes from the year 2000 to 2080, Minnesota loons are being projected or predicted that they would be moving out of Minnesota by 2080. And this is as our climate warms and changes, that our lakes and our environment here in Minnesota is projected and predicted to change as well. So when we talk about the effects of climate change for loons, as water warms in the summertime, think about those of you who like to swim in lakes, think about maybe how that lake would change. The temperature would increase. Oftentimes, when temperature increases in a lake, more plants grow. If more plants grow in a lake, then those loons, their visibility to see fish and catch fish goes down. Some of the types of fish that loons like to eat like to live in really cold water here in Minnesota. And so if our waters are warming, then those fish species won't be here either. So I hope this does not happen. I hope Minnesota loons are forever here in the summertime for us to see and enjoy. So it's something to think about, that every little thing that we do, especially it's the day after Earth Day. We like to say every day is Earth Day. All of those little tiny things that we do, they make a difference, not only to slow the effects of climate change, but just to protect our environment and all the species in it. Another threat to loons are boats and wakes. So loons, because they have such heavy, dense, solid bones, they sit very low on the water. I've been surprised a few times myself in a boat seeing a loon thinking, gosh, it's really low, and you can almost hardly see it. But they sit very low in the water. So unfortunately, sometimes there are boat collisions with loons in the summertime. So it's about being respectful of every species on the water and every species that needs to be on that lake, and giving each other space, just as you would other people who are fishing or boating or kayaking or canoeing. You want to give space to animals too. And one thing to think about is that if loons are at the point in the summer where they have chicks on their back, if there's a boat approaching, that adult is not going to dive out of the way of that boat because it has chicks on its back, and its chicks can't go underwater, and they can't. They would be. They want to do everything they can do to protect those chicks. So, thinking about that too, if you see a loon with chicks, giving those loons especially lots of space. And the issue with wakes, so if you've ever seen or know somebody who likes to go wakeboarding, those boats, they create a big wave under the water, and that wave has to go somewhere, and usually it's oftentimes it goes into our shorelines. And so thinking about keeping our shorelines protected and natural, we want to protect those shorelines, because as wakes come into the shore, they can start to erode those natural shorelines too. So some threats to loons, but the big threat to loon that I talk about in my work is lead, and the issue of lead. So I want to give you a second to think of an item that you probably have on your desk, in your desk, and maybe something you can think about that might have lead or doesn't have lead anymore, never had lead. So maybe as you're thinking about, what do I think about when I think about lead? I'm going to guess many of you thought of pencils. And I'll just tell you now that pencils have never contained lead. They have always contained graphite, but the person who discovered graphite, it was so close to being like lead that they thought that's what they thought it was, and that name really stuck. But it's always contained graphite. Other products that have contained lead or still contain lead, paint was added to lead to help, or lead was added to paint to help it dry faster, to be more durable, to resist water. Lead was used to be in our gasoline. We can think about certain types of ammunition, fishing tackle, and our pipes with our drinking water. Lead has been removed from paint because it was chipping off in a lot of people's homes, especially older homes, and making people ill, especially young children. So lead has been removed from paint since the 70s. Lead was also removed from gasoline in the 1970s with the Clean Air Act. And then lead still persists in some types of ammunition. If any of you are or know someone who likes to go duck hunting or waterfowl hunting, you cannot use lead with waterfowl hunting. It was banned in the early 90s. So you have to use steel shot, but other types of ammunition, lead is still allowed. And a lot of our fishing tackle contains lead, especially like the picture I have circled. Those are jigs, so a hook with a weighted end and the ball there. Those are jigs. And then different communities across the state and across the country are working to remove lead from pipes, bringing water into our homes, schools, and businesses. So we're going to focus on the fishing tackle aspect. So how does that fishing tackle get into a loon? My friends who are listening, if you fish or if you know someone who fishes, chances are your fishing line has broken at some point. And chances are you've had a fish that got away, and probably got away with your fishing tackle. So the danger to our loons is if they eat that fish, and in this picture, you can see those red dots on the fishing line represent the fishing tackle. If a loon eats that fish, it doesn't know it's also getting the fishing tackle inside of it too. So this is one of the main ways that lead gets into the body of our loons, is by eating a fish that has tackle attached to it, or already, sometimes fish have tackle inside of them too. The other way, and if you think all the way back to the first slide of the loon eating that fish, eating it whole, is that loons need to pick up small rocks off the bottom of lakes to help them digest their food. So they pick up these small rocks. It goes into a muscular part of their stomach called their gizzard, and the rocks grind together and help to digest that food. But oftentimes, again, my fishing friends who are listening, we lose fishing tackle. And if we lose fishing tackle because it's heavy, it sinks to the bottom of the lake. and we just can't get it back. And so a loon could then pick up that fishing tackle, and it would go into their gizzard. The rocks would grind that fishing tackle up. The acid in their gizzard too would also work to break it down. And lead is a very soft metal. So that grinding and the acid is going to break it down very quickly into the bloodstream of the loon. This is a radiograph or an x-ray of a loon that died from lead poisoning. So if you look at the left side of the image, the pointy part going in towards the spine, you can see its skull and its beak there, and its neck goes actually off of the image. The red circle shows everything that was found inside the gizzard of this loon. So you can see over on the right, all of the fishing tackle that they took out of this loon. I'd also like you to look at that red circle if you can. There are some light gray little circles in there too. Those are the rocks that the loon naturally was looking for. So likely this loon ate a fish that had some tackle inside of it, and maybe it picked up some tackle too. Unfortunately for loons, just one little tiny piece of tackle, a little lead split shot that we pinch on our lines will make a loon sick. And lead poisoning for loons is fatal, and it affects them very quickly. Within 2 or 3 weeks of getting lead into their systems, unfortunately, a loon will pass away. And those 2 to 3 weeks, they start to lose different capabilities. So they can't fly, they can't swim, they can't dive. If they have babies, they can't take care of them. So it's a very, very quick process for them, and very painful as well. And the estimate right now is that 25% of our adult loon deaths nationally are caused by lead poisoning. While Minnesota has a lot of loons, there are loons in other states too, and they are still they're still studying those loons and still finding sick loons. The unfortunate thing for loons and lead is that sick loons are seldom found. If they are found, there's really nothing a rehabilitator can do for them because they're so sick. I have read just about every paper about this topic that's come out in the last 25 years plus, and have not found a single report of a loon that's sick with lead poisoning being rehabilitated and released. So lead for a loon is unfortunately fatal. Some other birds to think about, bald eagles here in Minnesota. Lots of bald eagles get brought to the Raptor Center in St. Paul who have lead in them. The eagles, fortunately, are found, and they have a much better pathway to recovery. There's a lot more that rehabilitators can do to release bald eagles. There is treatment for them. And so bald eagles, while lots of eagles get sick with lead, at least there is success in releasing eagles. And a lot of our eagles here in Minnesota get lead into their systems by feeding on gut piles from deer hunting. So thinking about the ammunition that hunters are using, and if it's lead, eagles are feeding on those gut piles and getting sick that way. Another species that we're watching here in Minnesota and working to protect are trumpeter swans. Trumpeter swans are herbivores or plant eaters, so they're just picking up lost fishing tackle as they're looking to eat plants. And so this is work that my program has been doing. This is Sucker Channel. This is in Ramsey County. And so the road at the top of the screen is Highway 96. So this is the Vadnais Heights, North Oaks area. This stream stays open year round. You can see the picture on the right. That was a very cold day that I went to check on our drop box, saw a bunch of swans there. And so swans gather in this area, especially in the wintertime, because the water does stay open. But unfortunately, this is also a very popular spot for fishing. And since 2018, 27 dead swans have been found at the channel. And the last I know about is last March in 2025. I fortunately have not heard about any more since then. And because this is a well-known problem, if a swan is found in this location, the DNR is actually not even testing them, the Department of Natural Resources. So Ramsey County is working to clean up this channel, and lead has no magnetic properties. And so really the only way to get it out of the water is to pick it up by hand. In October 2024, they went out and they collected 1,000 pieces of lead, and that equaled 13 pounds that were in the channel. And some of it had degraded over time, but a lot of it was still very much intact. And then last summer in August, I met the group out there who's doing the cleanup, and they, in just one morning, picked up almost 500 pieces, about 5 pounds of lead. They had a scuba diver, a snorkeler, and some staff who were wearing waders just hand picking up lead in the channel. So doing some great work here to protect the swans that like to be there in the winter time. Now, our program, if you do fish, my friends, I hope you are, I want you to know that I want you to keep fishing, keep enjoying fishing. And this is just to bring this issue to you and to help you think about what type of tackle you're using and find tackle that's safer for you and safer for birds. There's no safe level of lead for human health either. And so I want to also protect you and your health too. So our program, we just really encourage people to try and make a slow switch to using lead-free alternatives. So looking for tungsten, bismuth, steel, and tin, especially when you're shopping, those 4 are the biggest ones and the easiest ones to find, especially in bigger stores. Packaging is not always easy to know if it's lead-free. It probably will not say it's lead-free. It might say it's eco-friendly. There might be some green text on there, but just knowing if you're buying something that's made from tin or tungsten, those products are safe for you and they're safe for wildlife too. So just looking and knowing those product types too. Also, if you're shopping with your family and you can't find anything, I encourage you to ask the people that work there if they have any lead-free options too. So they hear that people want to use lead-free, and hopefully they'll stock more as well. And you might be wondering, if you have your own tackle box or if you use a family tackle box, how do I know if what I have is lead or not? I always encourage people to start here with those small split shot sinkers that we pinch on our line for a little extra weight. If your sinkers have a dull gray color, I can tell you that they are made from lead. So that's an easy place to start. And oftentimes we have a lot of these in our tackle box. We lose them a lot. And so it's an easy place to start if you want to make the switch to lead-free. And I'll go back a slide. So if you look on this slide, you can see those split shot sinkers in this photo. They're a bright, shiny silver, and those are made from tin, which is safe for wildlife and for you. So start here. That's the first place to start. If you have jigs, which are also like the next most common piece of tackle that features lead, oftentimes they're painted if you can't tell. So you can't tell if it's a dull gray color. And I just encourage people, find one that you don't really love, or maybe the paint has chipped off a little bit. Use a pliers and just pinch that round jig head. And if it makes an indentation, you know it's lead, because lead is very soft and you'll be able to see that indentation with your pliers. So those are the places I encourage people to start with their tackle box. So some action items. If you can, and if you're able to find some lead-free tackle, try it out this summer. The fishing opener is almost here. And what a great thing that Stillwater area is hosting the Governor's Fishing Opener. So there will be lots of energy around fishing coming up here in the next 2 weeks in the St. Croix River Valley. So looking for lead-free tackle. If you have lead in your tackle box and you have a conversation with your family and after this presentation say, I just learned about how dangerous lead is, I don't think we should use it. It can't go in your garbage. It can't go in your household recycling. It has to go to your county's household hazardous waste site. So If you live in Washington County, it can go down to the Environmental Center in Woodbury. There's also the Environmental Center in Forest Lake. You can also go to the one. So you just talk to your parents and say, where do we bring like old paint or light bulbs, things like that? It has to go to hazardous waste. Can't go in the garbage or recycling. The best and number one thing that I would love for all of you, whether you like to fish or not, I hope that you share about how we can protect loons and eagles, swans, our water, ourselves. The next time you are out with people who are fishing. So maybe you're just hanging out on the boat with them. So I talk to a lot of adults. A lot of adults also say they don't know this is an issue. So hopefully you remember at least a couple of fun facts about loons that you could share too with the adults in your life as you're fishing together, or your friends too who aren't at this presentation. And then every little thing we can do to keep our water clean. If you see tackle or fishing line by a lake, river, stream, pick it up. The fishing line can go in the garbage. So trying to keep all of our natural spaces, especially our water, clean and clear is something that we can all do and helps with all animals. I'll leave my contact information here and happy to answer any questions in our last few minutes.
Well, you do have quite a few of questions, so I hope you're excited. To answer their first question, though, what is the loon's wingspan? They did look it up and they say it's about 55 inches.
Okay, it's going in my memory bank.
There we
Okay,
go.
thank you. Thank you, friends who looked that up for me.
Okay, so our next question is, what are all the different colored feathers loons have?
Great. So I'll just go back so if we think about that red eye, that is very characteristic of our loons. People who study birds, ornithologists, have thought that maybe it helps them to see better underwater. And now some are saying, we're not really sure, actually, because how do we know how a loon really sees underwater? The checkerboard pattern on the top of a loon's body is a visual ID. So as loons are flying over a lake, they would see another loon on that lake and by that checkerboard pattern. If you think of the stripes around a loon's neck, that collar or necklace, sometimes loons have to fight for territory. And so part of that is showing that off and exerting dominance too. Loons have a white belly. So if we think about animals and underwater, if you're underwater and you're looking up, you would see that white on white. So helping them camouflage that way too. So some different color features to them. But their plumage is very different, as we saw, summer to winter. And their plumage or their feathers in the summertime is all about showing territory and then defending territory sometimes, and identification too.
Awesome. How do loons get food in the wintertime?
So they are living in salt water, so salt water doesn't freeze, and so they are catching those crabs. I also saw one of our partners in the Northeast shared a picture of a loon eating a really giant lobster. They'll eat even like small rays too. So they're diving, they're catching all of those different species in the wintertime in the same way as the summertime.
Where is the best place to see loons in Wisconsin or Minnesota?
I would say the greatest concentration of our loons here in the state is like northern Minnesota. So lakes that maybe don't have a lot of people on them, that are bigger, that they can sometimes bigger, can support more than one pair. So if you go up to the Brainerd area and north of there, that's a great spot too. But loons live in the St. Croix Valley too. As I used to work in the St. Croix Valley, we had nesting pairs. on a lake I used to work on. So you sometimes don't have to go very far. I would say not many loons, if any, south of the metro Twin Cities in the summertime, because oftentimes those lakes, the water quality, they get much warmer. And so they're not great places for loons to be in the summertime. Also, the boundary waters, so anywhere really northern part of Minnesota, but also there are loons here locally too.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about Wisconsin, but I would say northern Wisconsin too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty similar in northern Wisconsin, northern Minnesota. So, are there different kinds of loons?
Yes. So there is the Pacific loon, the red-throated loon. Um, oh gosh, the yellow-beaked loon. So there are several different species of loons, and sometimes we see them as they're passing through Minnesota, like they might get kind of blown off course. But really, the loon that we see here is the common loon, is
Mhm.
the full common name for our loons.
Gotcha. Are the other loons also in the US or are they?
Yeah, so some of those loons are more out west in the Pacific, in those states. And then I'm not sure about the territories of the other species. So, but yes, they're scattered around, but not as many as common loons.
Fair. Um, oh, I scrolled down too far. Why is lead still being used to make fishing tackle if it is known to be harmful to aquatic creatures?
Excellent question. I wish I had a really good answer to that. Lead is used for fishing tackle because it's dense or heavy, and it's one of those things that manufacturers, they just have always used lead. You and also, unfortunately, too, some people will make their own lead tackle, which is not safe either to do your own smelting of lead. But unfortunately, we have no prohibitions in Minnesota about using lead. So part of this is trying to encourage manufacturers and companies to make the switch to more lead-free alternatives. To say like this is what we want, and this is
Mhm.
what we don't want too. So I wish I had a better answer to that, but part of it is historical too, and unfortunately, it's really hard to change things quickly.
Yeah.
Takes time.
Yep. Um, you already answered this, but if you want to
Yeah.
mention anything about why loon's eyes are red, if there's anything you didn't mention.
Nope, I think we and that red eye color is the brightest in the summertime. And then in the wintertime, it kind of takes on like a dull gray color. So or dull reddish brown color.
Yeah.
It's not as vibrant in the winter.
How long is a loon's lifespan?
Excellent question. Loons are very long-lived species of birds. They can live into their 30s. Um, and also um, they it takes a while for the young to reproduce. So a loon chick that is born this summer will stay here this summer, go to the Gulf in the winter. In the winter, this winter, after this, and then it'll kind of bounce. It stays in the Gulf and North Atlantic. They go back and forth depending on the season,
Mhm.
and it won't come back to Minnesota to find a mate and actually reproduce themselves until they're 6 or 7 years old.
Oh,
And so it takes a long time. And so part of this is protecting the loons that we have now, helping them have healthy habitats, that they can get to that age so we can keep having more and more loons and our population continues to be stable.
yeah. A break from the loon questions. What do you like most about your job?
Teaching kids, talking about loons, but teaching kids mostly because you have the most fun questions, definitely.
I agree. Um, can loons walk on land?
No, no. If they are trying to move on land, they will have to scoot on their bellies. Sometimes that is necessary. that they will do that, but an adult loon cannot physically stand up on their legs. On the Atlantic side, so like in North Carolina, sometimes people see loons who are beached and get really upset because here in Minnesota, if we ever see a loon on land, it's kind of a big uh, notice that there's something wrong. But sometimes those loons just kind of get blown in with the tide and they can get back out. So I've had to calm some people down who have shared that with me. I'm like, I've heard that is fine. So, but they cannot walk on land.
Gotcha. I don't know if you know this number. I'll be very impressed. How long is a loon from tail to beak?
I don't know that either.
Okay.
But I have to
Yeah.
add that number too. So I have some things to look up this morning to add to my list of numbers.
Yep. Are loons endangered?
They are not currently endangered or threatened. The Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, they keep track of population numbers, and so they say right now our population is stable and safe, but there are lots of emerging threats to loons, so I would love to see some more work from my friends there about population changes, but they are not endangered.
Okay. All right, we got to do a little bit of a lightning round. We have like five
Great,
questions in 4 minutes. So,
great.
can baby loons fly right after they're born?
No, their wings aren't strong enough yet. Takes them a while.
Do you know the population of loons in Wisconsin?
No, I don't. I'm
Okay.
sorry to be so Minnesota centric, my friends. Sorry.
Well, it is kind of your job.
But it is lower than Minnesota. It is lower, but probably not by much.
Okay. Are any loons bred and held in captivity? And if so, how do they behave?
No, absolutely not. Loons are terrible birds in captivity. And so anytime a loon needs to be rehabilitated, I think those rehabilitators work as quickly as they can to get that loon back out into the waters. We're talking about putting a loon in a bathtub with minnows to try and get it to eat, and that is not its favorite place to be.
Yeah. Do you know how or why Minnesota chose the loon as their state bird?
Okay, I think that it wasn't. I know that there were different birds that were proposed, and I can't remember the history of how we landed on the loon. But how lucky are we that we got to have the loon as our state bird? Minnesota is the only state that has the loon as their state bird. So I just say we love loons more than anybody else. So I'd have to look into that too because I can't remember that history.
Okay. What temperature of water do loons like best?
Ooh, I would say cooler temperatures. So probably a cooler temperature than you would like to swim in a lake.
Mhm.
So especially those colder water. So if you think of even going up to northern Minnesota, there are lakes in the summertime that you do not want to swim in because they are too cold. So definitely colder, cooler. I don't know, 50s, 60s probably.
Okay.
Who wants to swim in that? Maybe I don't know.
Oh, we have an answer of how long a loon is. It's anywhere from
Yes.
between 26 to 36 inches.
Perfect. 55-inch wingspan, 26. Okay, got it.
Yep.
Got it.
And then our last question is how far do you have to stay away from a loon and are there any laws?
There are no laws. And I would just say give them as much space as you can. Observe from a distance. If the closer you get, the more likely that loon is going to be to dive and get away from you. So, but there are no laws. Use common sense
Mhm.
and give them their space is the best advice I can give.
Yeah. Well, excellent lightning round on the questions there.
Thank you.
So thank you, Kelly, for a wonderful presentation. I'm a bit of a bird nerd, but I learned some stuff today too, so that was cool to see. Um, yep, and there's some thank yous in the chat, so everyone's very appreciative. It was a wonderful time.
Great.
Um, thank you for sharing your knowledge with us.
Absolutely. Thank you all. Take care.
Yep. And I hope to see everyone in 10 minutes for our next session about sturgeon. So we'll see you then.